Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Joe Kelly. I am the Community Relations Program Assistant at the Rochester Hills Public Library. And I would like to welcome you to this evening's presentation, Dementia Conversations, Driving, Doctor Visits, Legal and Financial with Rick Bloom, a representative of the Alzheimer's Association of Greater Michigan. We'd also like to thank the Friends of the Rochester Hills Public Library for supporting our programs with their many fundraising efforts. We greatly appreciate their support. We encourage you to register for our other upcoming programs by visiting calendar.rhpl.org. Next Thursday at 7 p.m., we welcome local NASA Solar System Ambassador Jerry Chevrier, who will discuss the science and excitement of NASA space exploration missions and discoveries. This evening, all attendees will remain muted throughout the program, and please turn your cameras off if you don't mind. And then you can feel free to ask questions with the chat feature below. We'll take notes on those, and we can feel free to select questions to ask once the Q&A portion begins. The program will be recorded, and it will be available to view 1 week from today on our website and our YouTube channel. And to introduce tonight's program, please welcome longtime community educator with the Michigan chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, Deborah Archer.
Hi, everyone. I am going to say hello, and then I'm going to stop my video so that you can pay your full attention to our program this evening. So thank you for joining. So welcome to the Alzheimer's Association's Dementia's Conversation program. This program is designed to help you talk to your entire family, including the person with signs of dementia, about the challenges and often uncomfortable topics related to Alzheimer's and dementia. These conversations may not be easy to have for you or for the person experiencing the changes in functioning. There is a fear of hurting those we love, facing changes related to aging and dementia, and being forced to deal with difficult family dynamics. You may try to wait until the time is right to have a conversation, but in reality, that time rarely occurs. The sooner these discussions can take place, the better. This way, the wishes of the person with dementia can be included as much as possible, and unexpected situations can be avoided in the future. I do want to remind you that while I will be presenting the information that you see on your screen, we also will be having video clips for you to hear from experts, hear from people firsthand. And while we are zooming this information to you, there may be a delay in what you are hearing as it relates to the slide that you see. So I would encourage you to listen to the information that's being presented rather than to have full focus on the person that is actually speaking, because it may detract from what we're trying to send as really good information for you. So when those opportunities arise, you will have that experience. So let's talk about the changing needs of the person. Often those are signals that it's time to talk. And we've heard from many people who tell us that some of the most difficult conversations they've had with the person has to do with going to the doctor to get a diagnosis or medical care, and deciding whether it's necessary to stop driving. Also making plans for managing finances and legal documents to be sure the person's wishes are carried out and the cost of future care is covered. Now keep in mind that as we talk about each of these conversations, we offer a variety of approaches. Not all of these approaches will be right for each person. The approach that works best for you will involve you customizing it to fit the needs and the preferences of the person with the symptoms and your family. Today's program, we will share some tips for breaking the ice and having difficult conversations around some of the most common issues that arise when someone shows signs of Alzheimer's or dementia. We're going to help you plan ahead and build a care team that works and communicates well to reduce some of the stresses that can accompany a disease like Alzheimer's. It's also going to give you the opportunity to hear from people who are dealing with similar issues. Now, these individuals will share how they handle these challenging conversations And we'll also connect you with some helpful resources to enhance the quality of life for everyone involved. You may not think of yourself as a caregiver, or you may not be the person that is noticing the changes in the person. However, if you are that person, noticing the changes that you are seeing in the person you're caring about, that's going to cause you some concern. So often we find ourselves avoiding or talking ourselves out of difficult conversations around these issues for many reasons. Sometimes our family members say that they don't know how to help. We assume that other family members who live closer are going to take care of things. And we fear that we might take away the person's sense of independence. The family disagrees about whether or not there's even a problem. And that one, I think, is huge when we're trying to get families collectively to come together and actually recognize that we have a situation. So sooner is better than later. Please don't wait for a crisis to occur before you have these conversations. You can actually avoid a crisis by talking about the issues and taking action in advance. And by talking early in the disease process, you'll be able to hear directly from the person with dementia about the wishes that they have and how the person can contribute and be a part of the planning process. That's huge, including that person in their own journey. Despite the difficulties of these conversations, they need to take place to ensure this person's safety and well-being is considered. Successful conversations start with being prepared in advance. And by that, we mean develop a plan for how to finesse the conversation, how to introduce the topic in a way that will be gentle and minimize resistance. And the use of finesse goes beyond honesty, as it involves understanding how difficult this conversation can be and thinking about how best to gently position the discussion for a positive outcome. And also consider what you will do regardless of how the person responds. For example, ask the person whether or not they want to know if you've noticed any changes in functioning. And in most cases, the person will say yes. And that allows you to begin the discussion. But if the person says no, that they would not want to know about what you've noticed, then focus on the fears that accompany these changes and how important it is to talk about the changes openly. The actual conversation about changes that you've noticed have to take place in a separate conversation, and that's okay too. So we can do it in increments. We also want to take notes on the changes that you see. So begin observing and noting examples of behavior that concern you. And take notes after you see something of concern so you can accurately talk about what you've noticed. So write things down so you won't forget the important points you want to cover. And bring those notes with you when you're having a conversation. Be prepared to talk about your own feelings, and it's important to use those I statements. Try to avoid any suggestions of blame or criticism of the person, and then they'll be less likely to be defensive or angry. And above all, be gentle in your conversation. Keeping that person's feelings in mind, you want to avoid having the person feel that they're being ganged up on. And it's really good to practice in advance. Rehearsing your conversation about sensitive topics with another family member will help you feel more comfortable when you actually have the conversation with the person with the symptoms. So consider possible solutions to offer during these conversations. And initiating the conversation at a place and time when the person is relaxed, well-rested, and comfortable is huge when we're considering how to approach that person with the best outcome. So if you can, sit next to that person, use empathy, and speak from your heart about what your concerns are. And when the person in your life exhibits changes in thinking or behavior, that is important to be aware that these could be signs of Alzheimer's or other types of dementia. There are signs of typical aging that take a little bit longer to remember something, or they may need a reminder on how to use the remote control. But you may start to notice issues that go beyond these typical aging symptoms, like the individual gets lost in familiar places or starts withdrawing from social functions, asking the same questions repeatedly, or forgetting recent events. People with dementia typically first recognize signs that have to do with forgetting and how to do things that they used to do with ease, such as managing money or remembering appointments. Now, conversations can go smoothly if reference is made to these changes rather than at the person. So we're focusing on the changes rather than making the person feel that they have shortcomings. And sometimes the person may be reluctant, fearful, or even angry when you try to get them to seek help. And this can be because their feelings about the disease and the causes of the effect of the disease themselves is affecting them as a person. It can also reflect the cultural changes or traditions, beliefs, or the stigma that goes with the disease. But we do have some tips for you and some tools that you can use to help get that person to see the doctor. And it may feel awkward to approach the person about the changes that you've noticed, but many times the person has already noticed these changes in themselves, and they have some concerns. The person may be afraid and deny. Denial is one of the basic ways that we protect ourselves from feeling overwhelmed. But the changes might be due to something other than Alzheimer's, and acknowledging that this can help the person agree to taking action.
I'm really worried about her.
We're going to listen to Donna about the importance of having a conversation. And again, listen to Donna's message rather than focus on her image.
I think you have to be honest. I think that's the important thing with it. To get a loved one to the doctor, I think you just need to be candid and honest of what are you trying to do. We're trying to understand what we're up against. It's just so important to do that, because you can't battle something that you don't know what you're battling. Again, it may not have been Alzheimer's, it could have been depression, it could have been so many other things. And guess what? There's other things you can do to take care of those issues as well. But that's what you need to be able to do. You can't ignore something. It's not going to go away.
Well, it's important to get the person to the doctor to see if the changes are due to Alzheimer's or something else altogether different. And there may be treatments available that can help the person, whether the diagnosis is Alzheimer's or something different. But the person can't receive treatment until they've been seen by a doctor. And you can be honest with the person with symptoms about the fact that this medical determination needs to be made in order to receive the best care. So suggesting a doctor visit can be all that is needed to get the ball rolling. Other times, just being honest and direct isn't enough, and the person needs more supportive direction. So here are some ideas that can help. Use words that are most comfortable for the person. Be aware that the person may be sensitive to particular words such as Alzheimer's. For example, you can say, let's talk to the doctor about the fact that you're having some trouble doing some things you used to do, rather than, we need to see the doctor to do an assessment for Alzheimer's disease. So I would avoid that altogether. That can create fear and panic. And let the person know that it's time for an annual wellness visit. Now, the annual wellness visit, which has been offered at no charge by Medicare since January of 2011, is a visit developed to update the personalized prevention plan that can prevent disease and disability. So this includes an examination of the person's cognitive and behavioral changes that may indicate a form of dementia like Alzheimer's disease. Many older adults have not heard of this benefit, but taking advantage of it can be a great way to get the person to have their cognitive issues evaluated by a physician. Also, pair going to the doctor with something enjoyable. Pick an outing. You may want to suggest that we're going to go see the doctor and then we're going to do something fun together, like let's go to lunch at a favorite spot, or let's stop for ice cream. So if you can make the after event the main event, going to the doctor is something that we have to get out of the way. And you can invite families to communicate their concerns and questions to the doctor too. And whether you're able to be there for the appointment or not, you can prepare a list of your concerns and questions and provide that information to the doctor before the appointment. And because of patient-doctor confidentiality and protections under HIPAA regulations, that's the Health Information Protection Accountability Act, the doctor will not be able to speak with you about his patient or patient without a signed release. So if your family member agrees to it, it can be helpful to get a signed release of information that will allow the doctor to communicate directly with you. And the release can be signed right in the doctor's office, so that's a bonus. And if there's still reluctance, we're going to try the therapeutic fib. And there are many times when the person with symptoms is extremely reluctant to see the doctor, regardless of your attempts to use reason. The person with Alzheimer's often experiences reduced ability to use good judgment and make good decisions. So sometimes this contributes to the person's reluctance to go to the doctor. And in these situations, the person's safety and care comes first. You need to utilize a technique that we call the therapeutic fib to get the person to visit the physician's office. And to get someone to see the doctor, some family members or friends tell the person that the doctor visit is required by the insurance company or by the doctor in order to authorize prescription refills, renew a policy. You kind of get the gist on that. So evoking some outside authority can help you the visit seem less of a criticism of the person and more that we are focusing on receiving good quality care and getting good information. Now, as we've heard from others, having a conversation about driving may be one of the first difficult conversations families need to have after a diagnosis. And you may notice signs that the family member's driving has changed, such as accidents or tickets, moving violations, or things are a little more subtle, like new scrapes on the car or the garage. You may even have seen the person make mistakes while you're in the car with them. Now, even though many of us will stop driving at some point, people are often reluctant to consider the issue because they're afraid they're going to relinquish their independence. Denial that anything is wrong can allow a dangerous situation to continue. But dealing with the issue early can help ease the transition. So we're going to listen to Chris tell us how this happened in his family.
There's no exact answer on this is when you stop driving. You could tell when coming up to an intersection, as an example, the ability to understand what's going on around you was starting to deteriorate a little bit. Being on the highway with cars on both sides becomes a little bit more difficult. And first and foremost, the safety of everybody in the car as well as other drivers on the road. You think about that and you want to make sure you're not putting anybody in danger. But then the difficult part is telling your dad, who you love, and you know he loves driving, and he's used to it, that he can no longer do that. But then even then, taking the keys away full time was very difficult. The doctor was very helpful in just saying, medically, you can't do this anymore. But my mother had the hardest time with this because she knew how much this was going to hurt him as well. And this is one of the first things that we had to deal with as a family when it came to telling my dad that he had to stop doing something because of this disease. That meant a lot to him.
And we all know how important it is to have that independence. But there's no single moment when the decision to stop driving should be made. You can incorporate the person's doctor or other professionals to let the person know that it's time to stop driving. Now, whether the changes in driving are due to Alzheimer's or not, here are some ideas that people have found helpful when discussing this sensitive topic. As we discussed earlier, not to wait till a crisis happens, so plan ahead before an accident occurs. Before changes in the ability to drive are seen, talk about the fact that the person will need to stop driving at some point. Many families find it helpful to have an open discussion and develop an agreement about how the person, like you, to recognize that it's time to stop driving, such as noticing more mistakes on the road or new scrapes on the car. When the time comes, the person may not remember the conversation, so it's helpful to write notes about your agreement to use later, or even ask the person to sign a driving contract. You can also express your concern about specific changes you've noticed. Let the person know that you care and support them, and reinforce that the reason is you're concerned. Use specific examples to show that there are real problems. Like last week, you did something really different, and here's what happened that caused me to be concerned. And appeal to the person's sense of responsibility and concern for others. For example, you could say, I know you wouldn't want an accident to happen for you or for anyone else to get hurt. And if you anticipate that the person may resist having a conversation about driving, here are ways to make it easier. So we're going to listen to Sheila talk about how she approached it.
Some tips on having the conversation is pointing out, especially for my father, the potential danger to others that it may cause if he's behind the wheel. And just talking about it from the standpoint that this is not only the best thing for you, but this is also the best thing for others around you. And these are some of the alternatives, making sure that this is what's going to happen, having a plan. If mom can't take you, then Uncle Thomas or will be here to take you, and we will make sure that you're getting out of the house and that you're doing some things. So, presenting the bad news, but then also presenting the plan. And for my father, that's really, really important to have a plan.
Well said, Sheila. The safety of the person experiencing changes as well as the safety of others on the road is the key issue here. And it helps to have a plan in place to let the person know that arrangements have been made to allow them to continue to go places and do things and be involved with others. So establish that plan of alternative transportation in advance. And be sure to include transportation to places that will help the person maintain their social connections and hobbies, such as going to stores or appointments. And as we start to ease out of our COVID restrictions, that we'll be able to have more gathering places. And I know that we will eventually get there. So consider church and social areas. So when you talk to the person, provide assurance that you want to help maintain an active lifestyle and that those needs are part of the plan, part of their plan. Incorporate the voice of an esteemed professional as well. And please have empathy. Ask a physician to write a letter or a prescription stating that the person must not drive, just as Chris discussed in his video. And using empathy in your conversation, and think about ways to foresee and maybe minimize the person's sense of loss, will be greatly appreciated. Consider talking about this from a standpoint of retiring from driving rather than giving it up. We're also going to listen to Wendy talk about a key component on making this conversation a successful one.
Talking to somebody about stopping driving, I think it's most important to understand that that is tied to someone's independence more than most things. And so by saying you can't do this anymore is like telling the person, it's like ripping away their independence, and that doesn't feel good for anybody. I know that I've always tried to put myself in that situation. What would I think if someone was saying this to me? You don't get to do this anymore. And how would I feel? And how would I want somebody to talk to me about this? And so if you try to put, I think sometimes too many people try to approach it as, very punitive. And I'm doing what's right for you. So why don't you understand, without really turning the tables and putting themselves in that position, understanding, how helpless that feels to take those things away. It's important to be thoughtful about what that experience is like for the individual.
And for all of us who are driving independently, we know what it feels like when we don't have access to a vehicle and don't have the ability to go from point A to point B. So driving is tied to a person's independence, and taking that away often feels like such a big loss of their autonomy. So thinking about what that experience is like for the person and using that empathy in your conversation helps make the conversation less punitive, like Wendy suggested. It's important to respect the person's sense of independence while helping them understand that you're concerned and that these issues really need to be discussed and addressed together. So if you're doing it as a team, then we can talk about the plan and what makes more sense as we move forward. One of the ways that we will all provide ourselves with choices that maintain our independence is by taking legal and financial plans into consideration for our future. Many families do this, only to be taken by surprise when dementia enters the picture. So, as medical and long-term care costs in the United States rise, families may need to step in and provide both care and help with a person's finances. So we're going to listen to Chris again talk about dealing with financial costs as it relates to Alzheimer's and dementia.
Financially, this disease will increase the cost of living. It's just a fact. So planning for those extra costs is that much more important than what you were planning for before. And so you have to review everything that's in place, see what changes need to be made, both legally and financially, and you have to monitor that going forward afterwards too.
And it is a fact that Alzheimer's disease and other related dementias increases a person's cost of living. It is one of the most expensive diseases that a person can live through. Changes in plans will need to be made and monitored on an ongoing basis. And it's always good to review existing documents to make sure that they are current. But once there is an Alzheimer's or dementia diagnosis, plans that were put in place years before may need to change. Care partners also need to update their forms, since the person with dementia may also be named as the durable power of attorney prior to the diagnosis. So that's a huge consideration. Please factor that in. Some people may have plans in place, but may still be uncomfortable discussing their financial situation. So you may also feel reluctant to do anything that may come across as intrusive. And family members, especially children, when they're talking to their families about and their parents about financial concerns, may feel that they're overstepping or intruding. So talk about it. Making legal and financial plans early ensures that the person's preferences are included in the plans and that families will not need to make rash decisions. It's no different than dealing with crisis in diagnosis, crisis in driving. You can have financial and legal crisis as well. So it's important to take the time to have these conversations, and it can be scary, but it is so necessary. We're going to listen to Julie talk about how she talks with her friends who ask her about having this kind of discussion with her mom.
Here's what I've come to after all of this. That it's the most loving and kind thing you can do for them is to be honest with them and say, this is like a really scary thing. And I feel a lot of discomfort bringing this up to you. But I tell them, if you're going to be the one who's going to take them on this journey, then you have to tell them, I'm going to be here on this journey with you. And there are things that we have to do to get this in place. We're going to go on this journey together. I've told you I'm going to be here with you till the end, so let's get this ready. It's like we're going to go on an ocean ship. We've got to get things packed up. We've got to figure out what we're taking with us. We got to get ready. And the things that we have to get ready, we have to make sure that we know which doctors you're going to be using. I need to get this signed, okay, so that if you go in there and they have to do surgery, for example, I got to have this durable power of attorney for health care for you. I have to have this worked out, okay? Now, if for some reason, okay, you need to go to rehab after something, I have to have these documents here, the financial stuff, so I can get these things taken care of for you while this is going on. I don't want to have anything get in the way of us being able to progress and keep doing this. I said, it seems hard because it's hard in our heads. You know, everybody's heard, read about people who've stolen from elderly people, who've done these horrible things. But if you're the person who's approaching this with loving kindness and compassion, and you're willing to take this person on this journey, you're not doing a bad thing. You're doing the right thing by talking to them about it. And you approach it from the standpoint of, I'm here for you. I'm doing this for you. We're going to do this together. And I'm going to help you through this. And these are the tools that I need to make sure that we can do this.
Julie expressed it so very well. You can hear her passion, her empathy, and yet she had a very important message to send. So talking about these sensitive issues is a kind thing to do with the person with dementia. Our fears about how the conversation will be perceived will keep us from having that, taking that important step and having these conversations. So approach the conversation from the standpoint of being with the person through the course of the disease and needing these documents in place to help them get the best care possible. So begin by explaining that you're in this together. These conversations and discussions may seem to go against some of our social norms and represents a shift in family roles. Understand that having this conversation will help you and the person with dementia make the plans you need to get the best care and will allow you to connect and enjoy your time together in the future. It can be tremendously reassuring to let the person know that you'll be part of the process now and in the future. This way, the person you love can feel that you're both on the same team. You're in this together, just as Julie had shared in her video. Start by asking questions and gathering documents. So think about the conversation as a chance to ask questions rather than to tell the person something. What documents are in place now and where are they kept? Who has copies of the documents and who should have copies? Who should review these documents? Family? Professionals? And then pull the documents together and get the ones that need to be completed or altered. And you can explain that these are standard plans that need to be made as we get older. And it'll reduce resistance to the process by explaining that having these discussions and completing these documents are things we all need to do as we get older. And break the conversation into parts and try different times and locations. If you had a conversation by phone, try it in person. You can also put it in writing to get the conversation started, or put it in letter form. And don't feel that you have to cover everything in one sitting. Sometimes it's so overwhelming. And if we can break it into smaller segments, then you can talk about the person's finances one day and then talk about legal documents at another time, so it doesn't seem so overwhelming. And involve others to help talk about finances. Ask a financial advisor to help with the conversation, or involve a family member, someone that they trust and respect. Some families make decisions to pool resources to ensure that the person can get the best care possible and that expenses will be paid. It's important to understand the financial situation so your family can help you make the best long-term care choices possible. And that's huge. Just as having these difficult conversations is challenging, caring for somebody with Alzheimer's disease is also challenging. But there are steps that you can take to make things a little easier for everyone involved. As our veteran caregivers tell us, no one can do this alone. Everyone who provides care for the person is on the team, and the care team works best when there are good communications occurring among everyone. So the first step is to begin the conversation by talking with other people on the care team. And as with any team, your care team works best when there's an open flow of communication and when decisions are made together. You, the person with dementia, and your other family members are at the center of the team. And whether family members live near the person, you can be concerned near or far, everyone can participate. Families typically look to their primary care doctors to help make medical decisions. Other medical professionals who specialize in dementia can also be included to make a diagnosis. And once the diagnosis is made, find out who will coordinate care on an ongoing basis. And often that's your primary care physician. But your team doesn't stop here. We have others that can be involved to help make a plan financially that is sound and works in the best interest of the person. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to our sponsor, Rick Bloom.
Good evening, and thanks so much for having me. And as I go through this, I want you to know that this is personal with me because I've had to deal with this with my mom. And so I understand the journey. When you listen to Julie's video and she mentioned it was a journey, it really is. And that's important to keep in mind. There's going to be lots of twists and turns and ups and downs. And one of the keys is to make sure you have the proper legal documents. And the reason for that is because the more you keep outsiders out of your affairs, the easier life will be. In other words, the more you can keep judges, courts, and lawyers out of family affairs, generally the easier things are. So what I want to talk first about is the legal documents that everyone is going to need. And I would tell you this, these documents are important whether someone has the beginning of dementia or Alzheimer's or not. These are important documents for just about everyone to have. And I think that's one of the keys to any of these conversations. This is important for everyone. It is needed. And I always tell people, there's only one real reason you do estate planning. And it doesn't have to do with saving on taxes or avoiding probate, which are nice. But the real reason you do estate planning is because you love your family. And you want to make life as easy as possible on your family when you're not around. And that's the purpose of estate planning. So what I believe, there's a variety of documents that everyone needs. And the first one is what's called the document locator. And just think about how much stuff we have today and how things are located all over the place. You go back 50 years ago, the average person when they pass away had a bank account. That was it. Today, there's 401ks, there are IRAs, there are online accounts, all sorts of things. And the problem is, when there is a family emergency or a death, people start losing assets and it causes problems. So I think the first step along the way is to do a document locator to find out where things are located. In other words, where are the insurance policies? Who is the insurance agent? Do you have a will? Do you have a trust? Where are those documents? Including what you should do in that document locator, list every account you have, but also things like your user ID and your passwords. It is a big problem that people have. They have online accounts and then people can't access it. So what you want is you want your document locator to be a roadmap, to be able to say, if something happens, this is where you go. It'll give you the roadmap as to what I have. And again, what I'm going to include is all financial accounts, any legal documents that I have, any insurance policies. I'm going to write what policies there are and who the agent is. And if you do that alone, if you do a document locator, you are doing so much just to make life easier on your loved ones. And this is a document you just can't do once and forget about it. It constantly has to be updated because as your passwords change, you have to change your document locator. Now, you don't have to tell everyone you want where your document locator is. You tell the person who you want to be in charge of your affairs so they know where to go. You don't have to put in dollar amounts. You just have to put in where things are located. And this one little document that you could do the old-fashioned way by paper and pencil will save your family a lot of grief and aggravation. The next legal document, and I believe this is a document that every adult in Michigan needs, and that's a medical durable power of attorney. And basically what a medical durable power of attorney says is if I can't handle my medical affairs, this is the person who I want to step in and make those decisions. Plain and simple, you are passing your power on to someone else. So if you couldn't make a medical decision for yourself, who should make that medical decision? Well, most people assume, well, of course, it'll be my spouse. But it doesn't work that way in today's world. And the reason is there's so many second and third marriages that the spouse no longer automatically gets to have that power of attorney. What if someone doesn't have a medical durable power of attorney, what basically has to happen is you have to go to court and the court has to give you that power. The problem is now you brought judges, courts, and lawyers involved in family affairs. It's expensive, it's time consuming, and it's frustrating. A medical durable power of attorney can also give someone the right to make the final decision for you of whether you should continue medical care or not. And you don't have to be specific in there. You could basically say, if I don't have a quality of life, I don't want to be around, but this is the person who I want to determine what is a quality of life. And in these documents, you can also name an alternative. You can have two people have your medical durable power of attorney. There's no problem with that. And one of the beauties of medical durable powers of attorney is you don't necessarily have to pay an attorney to do it. There are many free medical durable power of attorney forms that you can get. On our website at bloomassetmanagement.com, you could download a free medical durable power of attorney. And for those of you who are questioning, yes, that was my dog barking in the background. But medical durable power of attorneys are for all adults. And I would tell you, if you have an 18-year-old child, that child's a legal adult in Michigan, you're also going to need a medical durable power of attorney for that person. Another document that we have is what is called a general durable power of attorney. A general durable power of attorney gives someone the right to act on your behalf for things above and beyond medical. It may be dealing with the bank, dealing with Social Security, all sorts of issues that may come up. You want someone to have the power of attorney to step into your place and make the decisions you would have based upon the facts. And so, again, it's important for every adult to have a general durable power of attorney. Mostly you want to make sure that they go to the spouses, and if not the spouses, the kids, based upon your family situation. Now, what we also have is we have beneficiaries, beneficiary designations. And one of the problems that we run into when people run into issues and they pass away is that they have the wrong beneficiaries. I can't tell you how many times I've had to deal with where an ex-spouse is named as the beneficiary. Well, it is important that wherever you have a beneficiary, you check it and to make sure it's current. Don't assume that you named your spouse or your kids or whoever. You have to really pull these documents out and check. I can't tell you how many times I've dealt with someone that they passed away in their 80s and their parents were named as beneficiaries. And all it does is cause legal complications and causes someone to go to court and pay legal fees when they don't have to. So it is important in this process that wherever you have a beneficiary, you check primary and secondary beneficiary to make sure that they're still current. And you'd be surprised on the number of things you could have beneficiary designations. And one of the beauties of having a beneficiary designation is that upon death, that money goes directly to whomever you choose. It doesn't have to go through the probate process or anything of that nature. So the money gets to who you want fast. So if you have an account with Fidelity, Schwab, or Vanguard as an example, you can have a beneficiary. So that money wouldn't go through the probate process. It would go through whoever you want. It is important that when you do an estate plan, you review all your beneficiary designations. And I think every time you have a family change, whether it's a new addition or something of that nature, it pays to check your beneficiary designation. At a minimum, at least every couple of years, you should pull those documents out. Now, the main documents that we deal with estate planning are wills and trusts. Not everyone needs a trust, but everyone needs a will. And unfortunately, less than half the people in this country have a will. Your will is your basic estate planning document that basically says who gets your property. And in a will, we have different parties involved. The person that is most involved is called the personal representative. The personal representative is the individual who's in charge of the estate. Well, in my view, when you have a will, you should name typically a family member to be your personal representative, which means they would be in charge. If there'd have to be a probate, they'd have to take it through the probate process. And I know what a lot of people are saying is, but wait a minute, they don't have the knowledge to do that. So shouldn't I have a lawyer or a professional act as a personal representative? My view, the answer is no. I like keeping these functions within the family. And the reason for that is they can hire someone that they can fire. If you name a bank as a trustee or as a personal representative, and you don't like the way the bank is handling things, it's very difficult to get rid of them. On the other hand, if you were the family member and you hired the bank to do some of the things and you don't like them, you can easily fire them. I believe you need to keep control within the family. So that's why within wills, I want to generally name a family member or two family members as the personal representative. Now, in a will, you also, for many people, don't have to visit an attorney. You could do it yourself. In Michigan, we have something called the Michigan Statutory Will, which is a free fill-in-the-blank will that, again, you can get on our website and get a lot of different places. It's a very good will if you want to leave everything to one person or something of that nature. So if husband's leaving everything to wife, they can do a very simple Michigan statutory will. In other situations, you're going to have sit down with an attorney if you have a little more complexities within what your will does. Now, for a will, it's important to keep in mind that wills go through probate. And probate's the process where the court supervises the distribution of your assets. Well, my general view is I want to keep things out of court. I don't want lawyers involved. And the way you do that is to have beneficiary designations, but the other way you do it is by having a trust. And what a trust is a mechanism to hold property. So I have a trust. Now, in my trust, the property is titled in the name of the trust. So if I have mutual funds, they're titled in the name of my trust. During my lifetime, I don't give up 1 ounce of control. It's only upon my death or where I can no longer handle my affairs. When I can no longer, that's when the trust takes over. It doesn't have to go to court. It doesn't have to go through probate. So it's a way of keeping family affairs within the family. For those of you who are lucky enough to have an estate of over $10 million, a living trust can be a very effective tool in avoiding some estate taxes. For people that have an estate under 10 million, which is the great majority of people, you don't have to worry about estate tax at this point in time. Now, in a trust, there's a variety of people involved. First, there's what we call the settlor. The settlor is the individual who establishes the trust. They are the ones who can make changes within the trust. So on the Rick Bloom Trust, I am the settlor, which means I am the only one who can make changes within the trust. 2, we have the trustee of the trust. The trustee of the trust is the individual who runs the trust. Now, the settlor, the person who's establishing the trust, is set. There's only one settlor. Trustees can change over time. So on my trust, the Rick Bloom Trust, who is the trustee of the trust? It's me. I'm in total control. I don't want to give up any control. So on my trust, I am the trustee, the one who makes all the decisions and who runs the trust. I'm also the settlor, the one who can only make changes. And I'm one other person in the trust. I am the beneficiary of the trust. So during my lifetime, the trust has to operate for my benefit. So even if I can no longer handle my affairs and the successor trustee comes in, who happens to be my brother, well, he has to operate the trust for my benefit. It's only upon my death that there will be a different beneficiary. So during my lifetime, I am the settlor of the trust, which means I'm the one who can make changes to it. 2, I'm the trustee, which means I'm the one who runs the trust at all times and is in charge of it. And 3, during my lifetime, I am the beneficiary of the trust. So between those 3 things, I'm in total control. I have given up nothing. However, I've already created the mechanism that if I can no longer handle my affairs, who's going to step in? And that's where trusts are valuable. They're valuable in keeping your affairs within the family and have easy succession as to new trustees, new beneficiaries down the road. Now, with trusts, you can be as creative as you want. So I generally recommend if you're doing a trust, you want to sit down with an attorney because there's lots of things that you can do based upon your individual situation. And so I can't stress enough how it's important for everyone, whether you're worried about Alzheimer's or not, for everyone to do an estate plan. And it should be current. One thing we should have learned from the COVID situation is our lives can change in a matter of quickly. And unfortunately, if things change too quickly, you may not be able to do an estate plan. You may not have the legal capability. That's why it's important that you do an estate plan as soon as you can, and that every year or so you relook at it to make sure it's what you want. Because that's the key with anything in estate planning, is to make sure things are in place so if something happens, you automatically have the mechanism. The worst time to make a decision is in a crisis. By having an estate plan and having it current when a crisis occurs, it enables your family to have the control that they can take care of your needs as easy as possible. So that's why it's important. And again, never forget why you do estate planning. You do it because you love your family. Your whole life, you're trying to take care of your family. You don't want to forget about them at the end. So those are some of the things you need to consider with an estate plan and the legal considerations. And I can tell you, the journey that many people are going to go on is a difficult journey. Having the proper legal documents makes it so much easier in handling the crisis that you may have. Now, there's another end to all this, and that's the financial end. And I think that when we look at the financial end of the things, the first thing that you should do with someone is to sit down with them and do a balance sheet. Know what their assets and what their liabilities are. In fact, it's something that you could tell the person that you're going to do it for your assets at the same time they're going to do it for theirs. Most people have no idea what they're worth. They have no idea because they've never put paper to pencil. And so I think the first step in helping someone with their finances is to know what they have and to do a balance sheet. A balance sheet is nothing more than a listing of all the assets and all the liabilities. And it's important, particularly with liabilities, to know what interest rate are you paying. Because if you have to make decisions and you have an 18.5% charge card or you have a 5% personal loan, you want to make sure you pay off the right ones first, because you'd rather pay off an 18.5% loan than a 5% loan. The second thing that you need that goes hand in hand with the balance sheet is a cash flow statement. You know, you need to find out where the money is going on a regular basis. In other words, it's easy to know what's coming into the family. Social Security, pension, that's easy. It's hard to know where the money is going. Because in any sort of planning, one of the things you want to know is, what does it cost you to live? If it costs you $2,000 a month to live, that may be a totally different game plan than if it costs you $10,000 a month to live. And what most people do is they guesstimate. And I can tell you, in my 36 years of experience, everyone guesstimates low. I had someone once, and they tell me what it costs them to live a month. And I looked at them and I said, do you eat at all? He goes, well, what do you mean? I said, this is what your house payment is. His house payment was like $2,200 a month, and he says it costs him $2,500 a month to live. You know that was just wrong. Don't guesstimate it. Take paper to pencil. And it does get frustrating when people see what it costs them to live. But by doing a cash flow statement, particularly if to take over a loved one's finances, it puts you in a much better shape. I think what you also need to do in this process is start looking at different insurance options and coverages the person may have. You may be surprised at some of the coverages that people have. I dealt with someone recently, and it turns out they had a long-term care policy. They never put a claim in because the family never knew about it. And they actually had it through a policy for work. So I think it's important that you look at what insurance options that are available to you, and also keep in mind that insurance can be a good way to free up some cash. Many seniors bought different types of life insurance. They have cash surrender values, and those cash surrender values can be withdrawn, and in many times it's tax-free and used to cover that person's needs. And so it's important to look at the different insurance coverages you have and pay attention to those cash surrender values. Also keep in mind, a lot of people were fooled into taking loans out of their policies. That's something that is a little more difficult to deal with because there could be tax issues, but just keep that in mind. Government programs. you'd be surprised, there are a lot of government resources. The problem is, and we all know how the government is, they don't make it easy for us to understand the programs. We have to be diligent and find them. Well, if you're going to help someone, a senior particularly, it is great to start learning what some of the programs that are available, and particularly for veterans, for those that have served our country. There are a variety of veteran programs, both state and federal. And so it's important that you begin the process to learn what programs. You know, one of the things that was mentioned in one of the videos was that this isn't one person, it takes a care team. And that is so true. And the care team, you know, generally is the family. It is important, and I've dealt with enough Alzheimer's and dementia situations, that the family knows who's in charge. You can't have everyone in charge. There has to be a point person. And that point person, generally, the family should agree on that person as being the one who's going to make the primary decisions or handle certain things. If you have it where everyone's trying to do everything, there's going to be things that slip through the crack. Now, one of the things that sometimes you have to deal with is the cost of the care is more expensive than the person can afford. And in those situations, sometimes family members will agree that they are going to supplement those expenses. Well, those supplements and what the strategy is should be decided ahead of time. You should have an understanding who's going to contribute, who can, because if you don't, it can cause problems within the family. And so there should be that game plan ahead of time. And the sooner you can do the game plan, the better it is. Now, there's also something that it kills me to have to talk about this, but it is becoming a much more serious problem, and it's elder abuse. And it's not just the physical abuse, it's financial abuse. We have seen this across the board, that a lot of seniors are taken advantage of financially. And unfortunately, in the majority of situations, the person who's taking advantage of the senior is a family member or a close friend. So because of that, I always think it's important to have some sort of checks and balance system so that there are two people in charge that create some sort of, some sort of balance there. Because elder abuse is a serious problem. And if you see it, you have to do something about it. So I generally view if you have two people involved, if one of them is doing something, the other one is going to catch it, which I think is important. And I will tell you this, if you have a senior that you're friends with and you start seeing that they're having some financial issues, you have to be able to approach them about elder abuse. One thing you find with a lot of seniors, they're embarrassed to think that they've been taken advantage of, and they should never be. The crooks out there today are good. They are very sophisticated, and they know what they're doing. They know how to pull on our strings. And so no senior should ever feel that if they've been taken advantage of, that they should feel guilty. You see it across the board. It's just not the wealthy, it's everyone. So elder abuse is a huge problem. And for those of you that are taking care of seniors, you have to be aware of it and you have to start looking at it. And again, seniors a lot of times want to hide the abuse because they're embarrassed. You have to let them know they don't have to be embarrassed because they did nothing wrong. So on that note, I just want to let everyone know that I've started my own podcast, Rick Bloom Talks Money. And we have a number of topics up already. So I'd appreciate it if you listen to the podcast. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts from. And in conclusion on these issues, the sooner you can start the process, the easier it's going to be for your families. This is a journey, and every journey starts with the first step. The sooner you start working on this, the easier the transition will be. So on that note, I think we're going to open it up for questions now.
Okay, thank you, Rick. So if you have any questions, this is Claudia, by the way. If you have any questions, you can post them in the chat, or let's see, I don't know, Joe, do people have the ability to unmute themselves?
I can give people the ability to unmute
Okay.
themselves. Let me just see. So,
Oh, Rick, we have one that just came in through the chat. Could you speak to a Medicaid trust?
Okay, what we're referring to as a Medicaid trust is, so you're trying to protect someone's inheritance, because Medicaid's a government assistance program, and to qualify, you have to meet certain requirements. If you have too many assets, then the government disqualifies you from Medicaid. So what you do is you create what's called a Medicaid qualifying trust, and it's all legal, but it's a way of shielding that money, so it's technically not part of the person's money when it comes to determining their assets for government programs. At the same time, they can have access to it to cover their needs on an as-need basis. We use a lot of times they're called special need trusts. We do a lot of those, particularly for people that have a child that has issues, never going to be able to take care of themselves. So we're able to get government benefits with their health care, and at the same time have them get an inheritance where the money is protected. You have to be very cautious to dot the I's, cross the T's to make these type of trusts legal, but they're very effective in protecting family money from the government.
Thank you, Rick. We have another one that came in the chat, and it says, we set up a trust 4 years ago and paid a hefty sum to a lawyer. It's time to review it. Should I take it to the original lawyer who set it up if I want to make changes, or can any lawyer make changes?
Well, I think typically any lawyer can make the changes, because generally a lawyer is going to be able to read the document and write and make the changes. If you had a good relationship with the old attorney, I would say, yeah, you should go back to them. They may know your situation, but typically any estate planning attorney can make those changes. But it is important you deal with someone that understands estate planning. An attorney that just knows how to write a will really isn't an estate planning attorney.
Thanks, Rick. So it looks like the best way to moderate questions would be through the chat. So I do encourage people, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And as a reminder, we do have Deb Archer from the Alzheimer's Association here. And if you have any questions on dementia, or any stages of dementia, or the pathology of dementia, please feel free to ask those questions as well, because there is a lot of misinformation about dementia circulating. So any question is great. There's no question too small. So please continue to ask those questions in the chat.
And as I always like to tell people, there's no such thing as a dumb question. There may be dumb answers, but no dumb questions. And this stuff is so important that you should not hesitate to ask questions. And again, anything you can do to help you through this journey is well worth it. And while we're waiting for some questions, I'll mention to Deborah, those conversations with your parents about driving. So I had to have those conversations with both my parents. And one of those conversations was as easy as can be, no problem. The other one was much more difficult. So you have to look at it individually.
Thanks for bringing that up, Rick. Those are difficult conversations to have. That is our independence, and it is our autonomy. So I appreciate it. Go
I was
ahead.
going to say, that's why I'm in favor of the driverless car. It gives us another option.
Something to look forward to.
But
It looks like we have a question that came in, and it looks like, Deb, I think you might be able to answer this one. And it says, what do you do if the primary doctor says there is no problem, it is just old age, but clearly the family knows there are major problems? And we have another question after that as well.
Certainly. So the question is, the primary physician sees it as no problem, just typical aging. Unfortunately, dementia is not part of normal aging, and it should not occur as a person ages. And it might be beneficial to seek a specialist, and that's where you build your team. Maybe seeing a neurologist or a geriatric psychiatrist and sharing your concerns. That's why taking notes along the way can substantiate your concerns. So not just going by the general practitioner, although you may have a wonderful working relationship with this person, sometimes we need to look a little deeper and be the advocate for the person. You are the one that is noticing the changes, and taking action and acting on their behalf is certainly in their best interest.
And I would tell you, when someone sees that within the family, whether they're diagnosed or not, it is so important to make sure they have their legal documents in order, that they're up to date and they're current, legal and financial, because again, it'll make that journey so much easier.
Thank you for that. The next question asks about how much of dementia is hereditary? If my mother had it, will I have it? Or is there any way to prevent a diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's in the future?
Okay, it sounds like it's a three-part question, so let me start with the first one. Claudia, could you just repeat the first part?
Sure. So the first part is, how much of dementia is hereditary?
Okay, how much of dementia is hereditary? First of all, it means you're susceptible. If it's in your gene pool, just like any other disease such as diabetes or hypertension, it means that yes, it's probable and possible, but not absolute. So keeping that in mind, many families share a diagnosis, and someone is totally unaffected, and we often wonder, why is that? So having a proper diagnosis is important, so that we're ruling out anything that could be medically related rather than cognitively related. So we have a full picture as to what it is that we're actually dealing with. So I would start there. It's not an absolute that it's hereditary. What was the second part, please?
Any thoughts on prevention if somebody in the family does have dementia or Alzheimer's?
Okay, one of my favorite questions, because each and every one of us has a personal responsibility for our own health, regardless of what our genes have granted us. So we are who we are, but we have full responsibility in how we maintain our body. So first of all, I would stay focused on your general health. What can you do to be as healthy as possible? Are you eating to the very best of the resources that you have? Are we exercising? Are we moving? Are we monitoring the amount of stress we have in our life? Are we keeping social with other people? Are we feeding our spiritual souls as well? So as we look at all of the elements that maintain a healthy body, those are the focuses that we can have a choice in. Some of our hereditary distributions is beyond our control, and aging is also a factor. So how we age is to be factored in as well. So those would be my suggestions, that we take a look at how we are best caring for ourselves, and that is your best defense against any disease. Unfortunately, there is no cure for Alzheimer's and related dementias, and so the best that we can do is to live each day to the very best of our ability, make wise choices in preserving how we're going to age. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Deb. And I did put in the chat a website that we have about risk factors for Alzheimer's disease, and it'll go into those, deterministic genes versus those risk genes, and what that means for your health. And there was another question. This one asks, my mom is hesitant to take medications, for different things, which makes diagnosis conversations difficult. So are there any suggestions on how to approach this with a patient or with a doctor?
Okay. Let's see.
If you need me to repeat that, I can.
I would like you to, Claudia. There was a little bit, was just a bit fuzzy. So if you could one more time. Thank you so much for your patience.
Yeah, sure. So it sounds like, this person's mom just doesn't react well to taking medications, right? There's hesitation there about
Okay.
prescription medication, which makes having conversations about getting a diagnosis difficult, getting to the doctor. It sounds like that's
Okay.
the subject. And so any thoughts on that?
Sure. Suspicion and some paranoia is very common in dementia and of the Alzheimer's type, because they don't understand and they cannot process the logic behind you need to take this medication because. And because that part of the brain is compromised, resistance is the easier path, which makes the care partner role very difficult. So having these conversations about logic and seeing a doctor and doing what's best, again, as we referenced in the presentation, finding the right time, showing empathy and concern. If those approaches are not well received, we do use those therapeutic fibs because we are acting in their very best interest, and maybe we need to sidestep the true issue of going to see the doctor just to get a prescription refilled or just to get your insurance coverage up to date, so that should you need to go to the hospital, everything's paid for. A lot of times money becomes such an issue. Who's going to pay for this? And if we can use that approach, that when we see the doctor, all your bills will be paid for, is your medical bills will be paid for, but we got to do this on a regular basis. And throw yourself into the mix. I have to do this too. Otherwise, I have to pay for my own bills. So if we can make it personalized and maybe take the focus off of the person and redirect it to ourselves and say, you know what, let's go together. This way we can go to lunch afterwards and go shopping, do something, and kind of divert the focus of going to the doctor onto something more pleasant. It's a hit and miss. I wish I had a pure method that would say this is tried and true, but timing is important, especially if somebody's had a good night's sleep and you see that they're kind of upbeat. That would be an excellent opportunity to just kind of slip it in and say, I've made this appointment, so we're going to go to the doctor, but guess what we're going to do afterwards, and see if that doesn't work. And again, the paranoia, suspicion, doubt is all part of the behavioral expectations of this disease, which does not make it any easier, but at least be aware that that's not out of the ordinary. So I hope that those suggestions may be helpful in the future.
Thank you, Deb, for that. And I have another question here. So, Rick, I think this one is for you. We had his and her trust set up about 20 years ago. We recently heard that this style of trust is no longer state of the art. Are we at a disadvantage, or should we have our trust redone?
Well, I think if you haven't done your trust in 20 years, it probably should be relooked at. Depending upon the size of your estate, it could make a difference. Most likely it doesn't, but there's still other things in your trust that were 20 years old. It probably should be relooked at. You may not have to make many changes, but I'll tell you what you're also going to have to make changes of is in your medical power of attorney, because medical power of attorneys have dramatically changed over the last 20 years. So I think it's a good idea. Just that change alone in the tax law, depending upon the size of your estate, may or not, may not make a difference. But I think after 20 years, it pays to relook at your estate plan.
Thank you, Rick. And another question here. My mother has Alzheimer's and has declined recently. My father does not have medical or general power of attorney, and it may be too late to get her to agree to or sign the necessary documents. What is the best avenue for my father to obtain necessary power of attorney?
Well, there's a couple things. Just because she's been diagnosed doesn't mean that she still doesn't have the legal capability of executing a document. So I would ask the doctor, her doctor, if at certain times, as Deb said, sometimes in the morning it's better, that they have the legal competence to execute a document. And a lot of times you'll find that they do. So that's how I would approach it. If not, unfortunately, what he's going to have to do is to go to court and have himself declared as a legal guardian, which I want that to be the last step. So I would much rather work with the doctor and find a time that she can make decisions and she can sign a document. And then you have the proper witnesses there that you could accomplish that. I know that in situations we've been able to do that, where the doctor has told us that at certain times she's more competent and it meets the legal definition. But if there's no way that she's ever competent, then the only thing you could do is to go to court and to have your father obtain those powers. But my always philosophy is the more you keep judges, courts, and lawyers out of family affairs, it's a good thing. So I want to do whatever I can to try to keep it out of court as much as I can.
Thank you, Rick. All right, and we have another question. Deb, I think you are great to answer this question. So it asks, what's a good way to catch early signs of deteriorating abilities with Alzheimer's, like driving, before finding your loved one in a dangerous situation?
Okay. When I focus on the word catch, I'm assuming that you mean be aware and take action precautiously. The Alzheimer's Association is a wealth of information. First of all, the alz.org, I would encourage everyone to explore our website and see the wealth of information that's out there. Know the 10 warning signs is a good beginning. A person doesn't have to have all 10 of the warning signs to show that there is something to be considered in their cognitive changes. But as we mentioned in driving, the subtle changes, the scratches on the car or traffic violations, and I find quite often that our municipal and public servants often give our elderly a break. They find that I'm so sorry, officer, I didn't realize I was breaking the law, and they look so pitiful, and they let them off. And when we had a clear record that perhaps somebody was swerving, driving on the wrong side of the street, or bumping into curbs, warning signs that we would be concerned about as far as perhaps cognitive abilities or disabilities go undetected because there's no track record. So being aware of those subtle changes to give you a heads up and say, this isn't like you to drive erratically, or to be careless with your car when you were so meticulous about getting it washed all the time and making sure there were no scratches. And having those conversations ahead of time, saying, I am concerned, and these are the reasons I am concerned. One of the big questions that I like to ask folks, if you have a concern about your loved one driving, would you put your child or your grandchild in the back seat with this person and let them drive away? And if the answer is no, then that's your gut saying we really need to have meaningful conversations about your driving. And just because a person has a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or related dementia does not disqualify them from being a good driver. So we have to take a look at driving performance and those other hints and obvious indicators that a person may not be capable of operating a large vehicle in any situation. We've heard about individuals getting the brake pedal confused with the gas pedal and creating, horrific outcomes, and we don't want that to happen. The Hartford group actually has a driving contract that you can access on their website. And even though, you can have these conversations, have them sign the agreement, you can always pull it out at a later time and say, this was a conversation that we had earlier, and I know that you were really concerned about not harming anyone, and so much so that you agreed to this. And I really think this time that we talk about alternate transportation services for you so that you can still go where you want to go and not harm anybody. So to sum it up, to be aware of those subtle changes, be aware of the bigger changes, and please be brave enough. And that's huge, to have these conversations so that you can take the next steps.
Thank you, Deb. And another question for you. This person says that they have an 87-year-old relative who had, full function, except for, an occasional paranoia, and they suddenly went to inability to walk and feed himself within 30 days after a 14-day stay in hospital and a nursing home. And this person wants to know if such a steep drop-off in function is common.
Okay. So if I could repeat back, the person was of sound mind and had an issue medically that afforded them to be in a skilled care community for a while. And that's when the changes became obvious?
So this person did have a dementia diagnosis.
Does not?
Does.
Oh, does have a diagnosis of dementia.
Yep.
And had to stay in a long-term care community?
It was in a 14-day stay in a hospital and nursing home.
Okay. And the concern is?
Within 30 days after discharge, so after coming home, they had a really steep drop-off in function. So now they are no longer able to walk and feed themselves.
Okay. Okay. And it can happen that quickly. And oftentimes there are triggers that can pronounce the disease officially and make it more pronounced. So if we had a diagnosis of dementia, there is a definite recognition of progression. How fast and how slow a person's disease progresses is definitely individual. So we can't say that because we have a diagnosis of this particular type of dementia, it will progress A, B, and C. It depends on the health of the person. It depends on the other pre-existing conditions that might be contributing to the disease process of Alzheimer's and related dementia. It can be very discerning for families to see marked changes in such a short period of time. The confusion, too, of changing environments from home to a hospital to a nursing home setting to come back to home. Nobody comes back as they were with dementia because it is progressive. And just because they entered a hospital stay for a reason doesn't mean that the disease is not progressing. It is still marching forward, how fast or how slow. I'm not privy to the reason why the person was in the hospital. Was it surgery? Was it anesthesia involved? Could it have been a fall that involved impact to the head? It's a lot of information that would need to be provided to give you a clearer, more accurate opinion. However, progression with Alzheimer's and related dementia is ever present. and to expect that a person will be moving forward. They may have some lulls. You may have those plateaus where things seem to settle down and you can get your arms and your head around it again, only to see in a matter of days or even overnight that there's another change. Just know that any concerns that you do have should be shared with your physician so that you're not overlooking anything that could be addressed, that could have a remedy, a change in medication, a change in diet, a number of different things. We want to rule out everything. So all concerns, again, should be shared with your physician so that everybody's on board with the changes that your loved one is experiencing.
Thank you, Deb. We are 1 minute, it looks like on my phone at least, after 8:30. So I don't know if anyone wants to wrap it up or say anything and to summarize.
Claudia, I would like to just remind everyone that the Alzheimer's Association has a number of resources available to our communities, including our 24/7 helpline. And these are trained professionals that are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, addressing CARES concerns for the community. We are also very diverse in offering over 200 language translations to help the communities reach out to us. We have education programs just as we are with the Rochester Hills Public Library. Thank you so much for sponsoring us, and to coordinate with Bloom Financial and their expertise in the financial field and helping others make wise financial decisions in crisis, even avoiding crisis. As well as our communityresourcefinder.org. These are local resources that'll help you find respite care and in-home care, finding community living organizations, support groups, and other events. And not to forget the importance of support groups. Our support groups right now are online, so you can Zoom in, just as we're doing tonight. You can dial in, and you can do it from the comfort of your home and not have to worry, if you are a care partner, to have your loved one nearby and not have to worry about finding someone to stay with them. So we can offer that convenience for you. And I encourage you to go on our alz.org website to find out what times and what days of the week will best meet your needs. So thank you for allowing me to share that with the community as well.
And I guess I would like to agree with that. You don't have to recreate the wheel. There's a lot of great resources you could take advantage of, and you should. And for caregivers, it is important that you have your team together and you rely on each other. This is a difficult journey, but if you work together and you plan, it'll make the journey much easier and much more fulfilling as you go through it.
Amen to that, Rick. Work together. It does take a team. Sometimes it takes a village.
It does. It does, and it's important. And never forget the focus. You're focusing on a loved one who was a valuable member of your family. They still are, and they need assistance. And this is the most important time that you can help them. You can truly make a difference in the quality of their life. And I think it's something that when you do that, I think also the younger generation sees what you do. And I think it's something that they're going to learn from as well.
All right, well, thank you very much. I'd like to quickly just say thank you to all of our wonderful guests this evening. It's been a very enlightening program. Thank you all who joined us this evening. We look forward and hope that you will join us at future programs, which you can find on our website and our event calendar at rhpl.org. And you can also find the resources that have been presented this evening here in the chat log, if you take a look back at a lot of that. But please feel free to visit those sites too, bloomassetmanagement.com and alz.org. Otherwise, we will be saying good night for this evening. Thank you for joining us. We hope to see you at the next presentation. Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you. Good night, everyone.